Oh, welcome back everyone to another episode. So in this episode, I'm going to be speaking about the microbiome and its influence on stress, depression, and anxiety. So the microbiome, as I've explained, is important in many different aspects of our bodies, not just for absorption of nutrients and secretion of them and movement of them around the body, but it's also important for many of our organs and our systems that allow us to live. So in the previous video, I talked about the microbiome and bone health. I'm going to talk about the brain today. So there are more than 20 signaling molecules in the GI, in the gastrointestinal tract, both endocrine and metabolic. And they also communicate with the brain because a lot of them cross the blood-brain barrier. So also please stay until the end because I'll be talking about some very specific signaling molecules. So yes, they communicate with the brain. So signals are sent from our gut to our brain and they communicate, and it decides which hormones are secreted, which will impact your fat deposition, which impacts your inflammatory status, and it also impacts your satiety, so if you are feeling hungry or full. So there's an important group of cells called EEC, enteroendocrine cells. They are modulated by the microbiome. They only make up about 1% of your gut cells, but they're increasingly found to be really important because they are modulated by a microbiome and they cause signaling of hormone secretion. So they are implicated in the release of GLP, PYY, CCK, CRF, oxytocin, and ghrelin. So I'll talk about those a little bit later. So cholecystokinin, corticotropin releasing factor, and oxytocin, ghrelin. And then, as I said, the pancreatic enzyme secretion, PYY, and GLP, glucose-like peptide. So in microbiome disturbances, they have found that there's an increase in psychiatric disorders, allergies, IBS, IBD, so your intestinal diseases, autoimmune diseases, and also obesity. And these are linked with all of a manner of other diseases as well. So your microbiome is really important. It needs to be balanced. And our microbiome, as I've also mentioned in the previous video, is established as a baby when you are born. That is established. We can modulate it, we can change it a little, we can add and decrease and help it along. But a lot of it is established as a baby, as a child, with the method of delivery, if you're breastfed or not. That has a lot of impact in your later life. Then your environment as well, how much exposure you had to nature, to the outdoors, which will build your microbiome, how germ conscious your parents was, if you washed your hands too much or was too clean. If you were too clean, that could lead to a depressed microbiome. So psychiatric disorders are linked to obesity. Obesity is linked to your gut and to your microbiome. So if we can treat your microbiome, there is less side effects and only upside. So only benefits. There are no real side effects. With medication, there are lots and lots of side effects. So you want a biodiverse microbiome. So this main species you'll find are the Firmicutes. Wait, let me just find it on my page here. Firmicutes. So the Firmicutes and the Bacteroides. So they consist of Bacteroides, Lactobacillus, Clostridium, Enterococcus. So you want a balance of these. You don't want too much of one, too little of the other. So you want a nice balance. They can also make short-chain fatty acids, and these short-chain fatty acids modulate your brain health as well as your immunity. So high-fiber foods have been found to increase the diversity of your microbiome, which is good. You want a diverse microbiome. A standard American diet blunts your microbiome. It decreases the biodiversity and it limits it. It really depresses your microbiome. So that goes with low fiber, high animal products, high processed sugars, and high processed products, additives, colorants, flavorants, preservatives, all of these. They decrease the diversity in your microbiome. And we want a very diverse microbiome. Your EEC, your enteroendocrine cells, also control your serotonin release. It controls your satiety, your digestion, your hunger, through also controlling your pancreatic hormones, the liver hormones, and your hormones of hunger and satiety. They also control some of the gene expressions through calcitonin and tachykinins, and it also controls your inflammatory response. So we know that if some genes are turned on, then they can lead to, for example, cancer production or cancer cell replication. If those are turned off, then it will decrease your risk of the cancer. It can also, some gene expressions can cause obesity or decrease obesity. So gene expression is really important. So you can turn on or turn off some genes by what you are eating, and we've found that the microbiome, or scientists have published and found that the microbiome influences your gene expression. It also influences your inflammatory response. The more inflamed your body is, the more likely you are to get sick, some kind of disease. Disease thrives in an inflamed body, so you want to decrease your inflammation. You always want to decrease your inflammation. So it's also been found that these gut peptides can cross the blood-brain barrier, so they can communicate between your brain and your gut, your microbiome. Your colonic motility has also been tied to brain health and leaky gut syndrome, depression and anxiety, IBS, IBD. Lipopolysaccharides from your microbiome also increases or modulates your immune response in depression. So it can upregulate or downregulate or help it to function better. So if your firmicutes are too high and your Bacteroides are low, that has a link to IBS and depression and all of these other inflammatory diseases. So you want your Bacteroides and your firmicute levels balanced. You want more Bacteroides in your microbiome. So as I've also mentioned, firmicutes are increased on the standard American diet and when you consume more animal products. So if you also experience lots of environmental stress or a stressful environment, or you are stressed, you decrease your Bacteroides in your gut and your microbiome, and you increase the Clostridium, which is part of the firmicutes. Okay, so that is a real mouthful, but now comes the important part and the more complicated part. So your neuropeptide Y and your pancreatic peptide, your NPY and your PP, they influence your GABA secretion, and they also influence your nerve plexus and your neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are those that control your hormonal balance all over your body. There are so many hormones that can be influenced by these, and they are released by your EEC, your enteroendocrine cells. So your hypothalamus amygdala signaling is controlled by cells in your microbiome as well. So they can switch on or switch off certain pathways. Butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid that's made from fiber digestion, and it's made from the bacteria, Bacteroides, that are digesting fiber. So short-chain fatty acids come from there. And short-chain fatty acids increase your receptor activation. So more receptors are activated, and this makes for a balanced homeostasis in your body. So your hormones are functioning like they should. So your hypothalamus, pituitary, and amygdala balance, the HPA axis, is modulated through these EEC cells. So it controls your insulin release, your glucagon, your blood glucose, and it can also decrease inflammation and reduce anxiety. So an inflamed body means more depression, more anxiety as well. So I'm just quickly going to run through some of these molecules that influence the brain that is released by your endocrine cells, your enteroendocrine cells in your microbiome. So CCK, cholecystokinin, it influences your liver, your pancreas, and your gallbladder control and the secretions that they make. And it also controls your neurotransmitters. So a lower CCK leads to more disease, more depression, more inflammation, decreased nutrient absorption. So if you have more CCK, it decreases inflammation, it increases your neuron firing. So your body is working better. You want more neurons firing, you want your brain to be working, you want a less inflamed brain, which will then function properly and be happier. So you don't want inflammation. So CCK is released by a healthy microbiome. Then ghrelin as well. Ghrelin can stimulate growth hormones. Ghrelin also controls your appetite. So more ghrelin, you are hungry. It also controls your ACTH, which controls the digestion. So decreased ghrelin, decreased stress response. More ghrelin, more of a stress response. So ghrelin also regulates your fear, stress, mood, anxiety, and vigilance. So you want to modulate this. So it's been found that capsicum can release more butyrate, which decreases the ghrelin and reduces your stress. So things with higher fiber, cacao has also been shown to modulate ghrelin activity, just have it a balance and increase your butyrate. So plants and fruit with a lot of fiber will increase the amount of butyrate that is being made, and that will modulate and bring down the levels of these ones that you don't want a lot of, and will increase the secretion of the ones that you do want. So the next one is corticotropin releasing factor, so CRF. So this controls the endocrine secretion, your hormonal secretion, and your behavioral control. So it can either increase or decrease your cytokines, which is your inflammatory cascade, your inflammatory factors. So you can either have more inflammation or less inflammation. So you can turn on your immune response or turn off your immune response. You can increase your stress response or decrease your stress response. So you want lower levels of this CRF. And by consuming a plant-based or whole foods plant-based diet, or following the lifestyle, will also modulate this CRF, the corticotropin releasing factor. Then the last one that I'm going to talk about is oxytocin. So oxytocin causes contraction. So it's important for birth and important for breastfeeding mothers because it causes that contraction. But it's also useful in our everyday lives because it causes contraction. So it causes inflammation or inflammatory pathways. So when you have a cut, for example, it causes the secretion of the inflammatory factors there so that it will heal. So you want oxytocin in certain conditions, but you don't want it all the time. So your microbiota or your microbiome influences the brain levels of oxytocin. So it either secretes more or it secretes less. So you want a slightly lower oxytocin level because it can increase inflammation. As I said, if it's turned on all the time, it will increase inflammation and you'll be inflamed all the time. As I said, with gene expression, you want some to be turned on and you want some to be turned off. So it's important to have a homeostatic response or homeostasis, modulation. You want a balance. So this is where what we eat comes in. So a whole food plant-based diet has been found to increase the biodiversity in your microbiome, and your microbiome controls all of these other things that are happening in your body. So it helps to your hormonal control, your liver, your pancreas, your kidneys, your brain. So it helps to regulate all of these processes, working in your body. And this works to decrease the inflammation, increase the serotonin release, so making you function better. And as I mentioned as well, it turns on your neuronal firing, so your neurons are working better. So it's important to be mindful of what we are eating because it directly influences our health. We cannot say anymore that what I'm eating has absolutely no effect on anything. What we eat has a direct effect on our microbiome, and our microbiome has a direct effect on our health. And if we are eating ourselves into a diseased state, or if we are healing ourselves. So what we eat can be healing. We just need to eat the correct fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and right combinations of them. We can also include sea vegetables in that. So we need to just eat the right things. We need to just let ourselves gain a little more knowledge. And that is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give you the knowledge so that you can make better choices and that you have the choice, so that you know what is good and what is bad, so that you do not just eat whatever you want, and then when you get sick, then it's a big problem, and then you say, oh, but now I need to learn, now I need to try and find out what is wrong. So sometimes we don't worry about our health until we get sick, and that is a problem. We need to constantly be thinking about it and eating ourselves healthy. Food as medicine is the concept that I want to promote, that I want to show you. So be mindful of that. As always, stay healthy, and to God be the glory. See you in the next episode.